Welcome to this installment of the Action Online Summit from Dubb. Today we have Sean Sheppard with us from U+, and we're going to be talking about skills for the innovation economy. Sean, if you could start with a short bio and let's get into it.
Sure, Ruben. I'm a serial tech entrepreneur. I founded 5 companies. I've had 3 exits. I launched a series of venture capital funds. I've made over 140 startup investments. Launched a global accelerator program that's still licensed and in use today around the world by venture capitalists, incubators, accelerators, and government organizations. Launched a school to train people to work in the in startup roles in the innovation economy and tech startups here in Silicon Valley. And most recently, I acquired a stake in a corporate venture builder known as User Technologies, or U+ for short, where we build startups for corporations.
Fantastic. I'll go ahead and present some slides, and then you can speak to those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the reason I got involved in corporate innovation, it was quite by accident, really. We had corporations working with our portfolio of startups, and we learned that they were starting to shift their thinking away from just partnering or investing in startups and wanting to build their own technologies. They're starting to employ a fast follower strategy whereby they want to understand the trends of where capital is being invested, where users and markets are adopting new ways of doing business and using technology, and do their best to try and adapt quickly to that by building their own solutions. The problems, however, that we continue to run into is that they lack the stage relevant teams necessary to execute on those innovations, and most of those innovations fail, and they don't have anything to do with the ability to build a product as much as it had to do with gaining adoption in the market or the dynamic of the teams that were responsible for executing on taking those products to market. It's never been easier or cheaper to get products built, but as a result, it's never been more difficult or challenging to get real traction for those products in the market. And corporations don't typically think in terms in the way that we think of things in the startup community, where we don't like to write a single line of code until we know who the customer is, what the value proposition is, what problems being solved, and what they're willing to pay for it, because we can't really afford to. Corporates, however, tend to think about everything at scale and sit inside a lab and build some idea and a solution and then take it to market, only to find out that it's mostly wrong. And they eventually either scrap it or they overinvest and it takes too long for them to actually find profitability for that in a market. So we bring the startup mindset, skill set, and execution framework to large corporations and kind of view ourselves as non-dilutive co-founders in the effort of helping them bring new ideas to market. If you want to go to the next slide, Ruben. Next slide, Ruben, if you can. Ruben, are you there?
All right, so just some technical difficulties. I'll go ahead and share one moment.
Okay.
So I think we're on this slide, so I'll go ahead and present this.
Yeah, that's what I was asking for, is to move to that slide. So our approach is that is designed to do 3 things, really. To find the truth about where a product fits in the market, if it does at all, and what to do about it. Create a learning organization out of the team of people responsible for pursuing that truth. We're looking for learn-it-alls, not know-it-alls. People who can functionally learn quickly, take unstructured data, turn it into structured, actionable insights that allow you to deliver a set of products and or services and features and customer journeys that deliver the kind of experience to solve the problem that your customers are looking for, and ultimately do that in the pursuit of a viable predictable, profitable, scalable business model that transforms your organization to continue to stay relevant and lead in the innovation economy, where things have never moved as fast as they do today. Over 50% of the S&P 500 in the year 2000, Ruben, no longer exists. And it's predicted that 30 or 40% of what the S&P 500 will look like in 2030, we don't even know who they are yet. The turnover has gone from 75 years to 10, and it continues to go downward because, once again, we live in the age of applied technology. Most things are about workflow automation. Most things are easy to replicate and copy, and the purpose is to drive efficiencies, reduce costs, and improve quality of that experience. Amazon and Apple have taught us, if anything, that it's not what you make, it's how you make people feel that matters the most. And the enterprises especially need to start thinking in that way. So if you can be focused as an organization on seeking the most objective truth possible, be active functional learners in pursuit of that profitability, you can transform your culture without even realizing it. And the best way to do that is with the stage relevant teams who can work across the entire innovation life cycle in a very agile way. People who can work on the market, people who can work on the product, people who can work outside of your business in a very safe way to learn quickly and cheaply and quietly where the opportunities exist and how to capitalize on those opportunities, and do it in a very continuous way. And we call it the portfolio-based approach towards venture building, where you curate and collect a portfolio of ideas, and then you stack rank those ideas based on the ones that you think have the most strategic opportunity of winning in the shortest period of time possible with the least amount of time, money, and resources. And then use that momentum to validate that this innovation operating model works, it's effective, and then you can run multiple projects through that cycle at any given time, depending on your budget and resources and your ambition. And that covers, in the methodology, the next slide, please, what we call these 5 key stage areas. First is ideation and IP prioritization. You're either sitting on a portfolio of ideas or intellectual property that you are interested in commercializing. And inside of 4 weeks, you can quickly stack rank and identify what you should be working on. Then take that idea and validate the idea in the market before you build anything through deep customer development, user interviews, research, value proposition generation to understand who's the ideal initial customer profile, what's the initial value hypothesis, what do we think the business model is going to look like, what problem are we really solving, and how are we going to solve it, who else out there solving it now that we can learn from. And then based on that, build some very lightweight minimum value, what I call minimum valuable products, not minimum viable. I think they need to be valuable out of the gate. I don't think it's enough for them just to be quote unquote viable and usable, but they have to demonstrate value. And then from there, be able to translate that into what really needs to be built. What does the customer actually want? Not what we think they want. By performing those tests in a way, and usability tests that allow us to understand more holistically what that's going to look like. And from that point, we've achieved what we think is either proof of market or no proof of market. And if it's no proof of market, you need to get rid of it and move on to something that you can prove works in the market. And then at that point, now it's time to build, because you know your customer is and hopefully what they're willing to pay and how you're solving the problem. And then from there, with a full commercialization effort, we can launch that into the market, start driving customer acquisition, and start preparing that particular business idea for scale once it's been validated, and either spin it out or spin it back in or let it continue to operate on its own. Next slide. Great. How we work with our organizations is we're set on a very collaborative, transparent way of working with our organizations, because we want them to not just see us catch the fish, but learn how to fish, and then ultimately sell the fish up the chain in the organization in a way that continues to garner the support that they need. We need a quiet and safe space to do our work. We need air cover from the organization, and we need stakeholder support that gives us access to the subject matter expertise, their customer ecosystem, and all the other relevant resources we need to learn. And those people need to be held accountable. Next slide. And what makes it unique and what makes us different is that we bridge that traditional gap between, say, outside management consultants that are paid a lot of money, typically by the slide, to tell you what to do. And then the teams you're trying to recruit inside your organization to execute on it, who are focused on your core business and not on the innovation. You might have great innovation teams, but they might have strategy people, you might have marketing people, but you don't have the full gamut of what's required to build a startup. And if your innovation organization isn't full of people who have experience in building startups, they're probably not the right folks, to be completely honest. You have to view these as startup plays. So we bring the product team, we bring the market team, we bring the design team, we bring the tech team, and we bring it as a fully staffed team that embeds itself into the idea and the organization in a way and fills all the gaps where you don't have those resources. If you have some of the resources, we bring the others. But for the most part, it's a full turnkey approach towards building a new venture. And our experience is we've built over 80 plus digital businesses and generated over $1 billion in market value. We've got over 60 plus case studies on our website. And it's not about the industry or the sector or the vertical, Ruben. It's about the stage of a product going to a market. The dynamic of taking something someplace new, whether it's a new product to an existing market, an existing product to a new market, or a new product to a new market, is very different. And you know this as a startup entrepreneur yourself, than it is when you're managing and operating existing businesses with familiar people and familiar customers and a familiar ecosystem.
Amazing. Well, yeah, please.
Yeah. And then that's an example there of how we organize teams, and how we activate an engagement is by identifying a project opportunity through a discovery session, and then coming in at any stage, either at the project level or more to strategic portfolio-based level, and start to work alongside our clients.
Got it. And I see this kind of workflow right here of discovery session opportunity, sprint and validation, and marketing testing.
That's right. We're a global organization. We've got offices in 5 countries. And everybody on our team has come from the startup world. We're all raised in it, which I think makes us unique and more relevant to what I think the future of corporate innovation is, which is in venture building and a portfolio-based approach towards it.
Now, a couple of questions. So, you mentioned this idea of a minimum valuable product, which is different from a minimum viable product. This is from the Lean Startup methodology. And I really appreciate this reference because it's true. It is so easy to put technology out there into the world. We can grab a WordPress site or go to Fiverr, go to some template and build something that is truly minimal, right? But how valuable is that?
Yeah, you really, dirt cheap. It's easy. Yeah. But what's the purpose of it? Who's it for, and why are you building it, and who cares?
Right. So the question for you is, how can we become more both self-aware but also customer-centric to understand the definition of value? What is that? Is that a check that's written? Is it a letter of intent? Is it true repeated usage? Give us some benchmarks there.
So there's a couple of prisms I think about this through, right? Like, to me, the definition of product market fit is word of mouth customers. So you have customers that are willing to tell the world that they can't live without what you do. And what I've always taught and what I've always done in my own startups is to reverse engineer the path to get there. And that's always starts with an initial value hypothesis, an initial customer hypothesis, and then going out and talking to those people to validate that. If you don't validate it, then what's the point? And you can do that without building just quite yet, right? So that when you do actually build, you're building something that's honed in on a very specific subset of value that creates the initial hook necessary to create that engagement and ultimately that fair exchange of value in the form of monetization. And you'll see the best EIRs in the Valley have been doing it this way for years. They'll sit inside a VC like my old fund, and they'll spend a year and a half just trying to find out big problems they can solve really well in markets that are big enough to get venture. And they'll do it by having conversations. and then they'll hone in and they'll focus and they'll go deep with fewer customers instead of wide with more, to understand what that initial cohort looks like and how they, how they can solve a real problem for them.
Mm. Yeah, totally agree. Another question is that there's this adage, a limiting belief potentially of many entrepreneurs that are connected in some capacity to the VC world, which is that money can create you or money can destroy you. If you get overcapitalized, if the cap table gets too messy, if the vested interests of all the shareholders are to create a unicorn and to do that at all costs and to incur all the risks that are necessary to do so, that it could ultimately result in destruction. What is your take on finding that balance of having organic growth, building a valuable, viable, sustainable, eventually profitable business, but at the same time hitting some sort of a growth trajectory that's meaningful to the shareholders, especially if they're institutional?
Sure. Well, I think at the end of the day, if you're doing, traction always speaks louder than words. So if you leverage that, if you use that traction as your leverage to maintain ownership and control, and you can grow intelligently and take capital in a way that doesn't compromise the integrity of what you're trying to do, you're in a strong position. Not everybody has that ability, or not everyone recognizes that in the moment. And there's this romantic thing in the Valley about celebrating the raise. And if you're focused on developing products and raising money, which is part of the culture of the entire angel, seed, and accelerator incubator community, bless them all. They all are helpful in one way or another, but 99% of them are focused on developing products and raising money, when what they really should be focused on is developing markets and making money. If you have that mindset as a founder and a founding team, that your job is to let the traction speak for you before the investors do, you can at least manage it and maintain some level of ownership and control that allows you to take money in without sacrificing too much equity, so that you can't control and it becomes something that's uncontrollable. And you've heard, I'm sure if you just dig in, you'll have heard the horror stories as well as the good, the good and the bad and the ugly about how certain founders have done this well. It's not always a pretty situation, but they've stuck to their guns, and they've been able to maintain their vision, their strategy, and execute well against the pressures of that big, fast capital. And again, it's a world-class problem if you have it, right? Because very few even get to that point. And just because you may or may not be a venture-capable business doesn't mean you're any better or worse than anyone else. 89 or 90% of the company, probably more, probably 95% of the successful businesses in this country don't have a single venture capital dollar in them. It doesn't mean it's not worth it. It doesn't mean the methodology is any different either.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think another idea that's very romanticized in the Valley specifically is the idea of failure. Here I have sharing on my screen a great Lamborghini. I think this is an Aventador with the license plate failure, which of course is a celebration either for previous failures that this entrepreneur had and endured, or it's what people used to call them in high school or something like this.
Yes.
And this is, I don't know if you've seen this. I've actually seen this car in real life in the Valley, and every time I see it, it's just funny. I've seen it probably more than one time. I saw it on Santana Row where they park their cars. On the side.
Yeah. Well, look, to me, it's only failure if you don't learn from it, right?
There you go.
Somebody say to me once recently, they're like, I'm shutting down this thing. I've got to start over. I said, no, you're not starting over. You're starting from experience.
Right.
And experience is what you get when you don't get what you want. And we all have that. And there's that old Japanese proverb, if you fall 7 times, get up 8.
Yeah.
And that's where most of the stuff, societal conditioning that exists, from school age, when as children we're told no 17 more times than we're told yes on average, because we're afraid to make mistakes. We have what's called a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. Carol Dweck wrote a fantastic book on this called Growth Mindset. She was a child psychologist trying to understand what happened with children between the ages of 1 and 5 and then 5 to 18 and why they changed and how they became so fixed. And it's so much to do with the way we're conditioned by society to don't do this or don't do that, or not or teach and learn to the test, versus it's okay to screw up. I mean, if you're not fucking up, you're not trying. And that should be celebrated, right? Within reason. But there's a certain innate trait in successful entrepreneurs. And I believe it is that growth mindset. They don't give up. They're not deterred. Sure, we have our ups and downs. Sometimes I say being a successful entrepreneur is just like being Andy Dufresne in Shawshank Redemption, right? You're wrongfully placed in the wrong box for 18 years. You chip your way out of it somehow, and you have to wade through 400 yards of human feces in a pipe to find some air, and then your reward is you're ended up on a beach, sand in a boat. So I don't know how sexy that really is. Stephen King should write more books about entrepreneurs if he wants more stories. But that's who we are, right? We didn't choose it; it chose us. That's how we're built. It's in our DNA. But there's a lot that non-entrepreneur types can learn from that, right? I mean, you can have a learn-it-all mindset instead of a know-it-all mindset. You can remove the word rejection from your vocabulary and replace it with feedback and view that as a positive and a gift and something that's going to help you get better. You can become more self-aware. You can become better at personal and professional relationships. You can develop yourself as a person and a professional at the same time, because I don't see there being a distinction between those two. You can develop your emotional intelligence. The things that are going to separate you from the AI is your EI. And you can develop and work on those things and spend a few minutes every day just learning and finding different ways of staying on top of those things, managing your energy and removing toxic people from your life, sacrificing relationships for the betterment of yourself and your family. There's a lot of things that we can do to improve ourselves. I'm 48 years old. I'm just learning this shit now.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Well, EI over AI. How do we compete with those computers? It's a great solution. Let's focus.
I don't see them taking over creative thinking.
Right. Let's invest into our creativity. Let's invest into our emotional quotient. Absolutely agree. Final question for you is this idea of scarcity mindset versus growth mindset when it comes to investing both into ourselves and into our businesses. Now, obviously, when organizations align themselves with your organization, U+, there's an investment to be made with a presumed ROI, which I firmly believe in. How can entrepreneurs overcome some of those limiting beliefs that state we have to be extremely careful with our resources? We can't spend money to invest. We cannot afford agencies. We cannot afford partners. How can we as entrepreneurs overcome some of those limiting beliefs so that we truly get real ROI?
Yeah, well, first you have to have a belief system like I do that says it's not what it costs, it's what it makes, right? So you have to run yourself through the scenarios. And I am a big firm believer in the intelligent allocation of the limited resources that you have. But I'm also, and because of that, I'm a big believer in what Naval Ravikant calls the age of infinite leverage. Leveraging capital, leveraging technology, leveraging media, leveraging people. And what's made us great at U+ is our ability to leverage people. My job every day is to develop new business, create vision and strategy, and recruit the best freaking awesome people on the planet to be a part of what we're doing. And when I do all three of those things well, we do really, really well. But I think the most important one by far is finding awesome, amazing people who think like we do, who have our similar shared experiences, who want the same things and buy into our culture and our way of doing things. And that always begins with mindset. And so I think it's really important that people recognize that there's an ability to leverage all of this. I have an abundance mindset. I believe that the pie is infinite in its size if you allow it to be. And so by leveraging others and leveraging those different areas that I talked about, and then just being intelligent with what resources you have and how you use those resources to create that leverage is the right way to think about it.
Fantastic. And where can folks learn more about you? I know that your website's u.plus. Would love to get social channels, any resources, anything available.
Yeah, I mean, we're everywhere. They can certainly connect with me on LinkedIn or follow us on LinkedIn on the U Plus page. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram at Sean A. Sheppard, and then usertechnologies.com or u.plus. They can find us there as well.
Thank you so much, Sean. Really appreciate you.
You too, Ruben. Thank you.
Stick around for some follow-up notes. Thank you.